decoupage sheet for this particular video, and to do that what I've done is I've printed the image I want to decoupage 4 times the same size. Now you could do as many or as few layers as you want to do, but what I would say is that background base layer you're going to print either onto your card or onto your background card, and do that separately because you're not going to be cutting that out. So this is just purely for the bits that you are going to cut out. Now this is onto some photo paper, but it could be decoupage paper, it could be just plain white card, it could be marker card and so forth. Doesn't really matter. On top of that I've put a piece of layout paper, but that could be tracing paper. It's just going to help you kind of be able to see a bit better in the video if I do this onto layout paper. And as such, because this is a little bit thicker, we can use a light mat to help us. So let me just turn on my battery pack. There we go, and we have light. Now what you're going to want to do is to trace around each layer as you want it to cut out. Now remember, where you draw is going to be where your blade goes. So if you've got something like this where you have quite a thick outline, you want to be drawing to the outside of that outline, just so that you're keeping that all in. If we go down the middle, then sometimes you get like a half and half outline, which can look a bit weird when you've got these thicker bits inside. And then you can, once you have cut out your pieces, you're going to go around the edge with a black pen just to make it so that everything blends in nicely. Now these images could already have been coloured, but just for speed I'm just going to kind of show you this lovely outline so it's nice and clear for you to see. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to first of all work out which layers you want to create. Now my pen has a fresh tip on it, there we go, let's take that off. And one of them you're going to kind of pick out all your little details. And that's because we're going to have like a no overlapping rule. So like this one here, let's say this is our detail piece, we can go, actually we're going to have all the cat noses. So I'm going to go around the outside, and you want to take your time and do this as accurately as possible, and that's your cut line. So we're not worrying about all the details inside that line, or even in some circumstances outside of it. We're just doing those basic shapes so that we have that nice clear cut line. Like so. And you want to take your time doing this and be as accurate as possible. Now I am doing this with an erasable pen, so if you think that I'm being awfully brave doing this in a pen, no, it's an erasable one. And that's mainly so that you can see it nice and clearly on the video where I'm going. And we're going to use background scan to position these once we've done our ScanNCut data. So it's important that we make sure that our paper isn't moving, so it's fixed with some washi tape. And I'm also going to do this heart here as well. Okay. Now, if there's something that you're likely to want to 3D, but it's not actually directly touching these, we can just do that as a little separate item just down here and again. I'll just go around that outside. And the same with this one here, just because it's that little bit in the background, and by keeping the nose a bit flatter. Oh, gone too far. I'll be making use of my eraser in a minute. There we go. Dum dum. Let's just redo this bottom bit of his nose here as well. I'm not quite happy with that, so we can redo it. And same with this bit just here. Let's take that out. Now with these erasable pens, what you can do is actually use your heat gun to kind of knock those back. Now my bottom sheet's just moved just a fraction, which is annoying. If it does that, just try and reposition it. Try and work out why it's shifted and then tape it back down. It's moved really. I thought I'd stuck it really well. Okay. Now you'll notice I haven't stuck it to the actual decoupage paper, and the reason for doing that is we are going to actually scan these separately. So I'm just going to pop a little bit more tape on there just so it doesn't shift again. Now that we've got that line back up. Now what I'm going to do is pause the video there for a moment, and then I'm going to really quickly do the rest of these layers, and then I can talk you through the rest of the process without you having to spend lots of time watching me trace. Okay, so I've completed my tracing, and just to take you through what I've done, so this is kind of our first layer, so just above the background, and because we're going to be covering this piece up with some of the other details, I've taken the opportunity just to move one of the carrot noses from off this layer to this one, so that we can use a face to kind of 3D up above the other two. Now moving to this one here, again we've gone just around those main faces and just one side of the scarf, so that we're going to get a little bit of differentiation between the layers. And I've also taken the opportunity to just do those hats. Okay, now on to this next one. We're just focusing on our main focal faces just here, and like I said, we're going to pinch this one to just 3D this one up a little bit more so we get this sense of depth. So far so good. Now at this point you might decide that you want to kind of take out some of these background elements, such as the heart. So I've got a couple of those that I've kind of traced around, and you could do the two here. I've done the little heart element that we can put onto the top layer of our flower pot, and then it's kind of over to you. So once you've done this bit, we can detach this away very carefully. This is why we use washi rather than masking tape, because we want to make sure that we don't tear our piece of paper, which is usually the point where it's famous last words. And I end up doing the very thing that I've just said I don't want to do. So I will go very careful. Okay, and you can then colour your decoupage sheet if you haven't done so already, or you can wait until after you've cut them out. So it really is down to personal preference. Now personally, I find it easier when it's big sheet to then actually go and colour before cutting, It just makes life a little bit easier, especially when we get to the like background scan and things. Okay, so we can use this, if I put these side by side, as a colouring guide so that we know which areas to colour and which we don't need to bother with. So how do I mean? If we look at the cut line for this first panel up here, then we can move this panel here. So we know that we only need to colour certain elements. So like the flower pot from this one here, and these two little characters up the top. And you want to do just a little bit kind of below your cut line, just in case, or rather than below, just inside, just so that you know that your layers, as they build up, don't have any glaring white underneath. Okay, so I'm going to go away and do that, and then we'll have a nice coloured sheet. Okay, so very quickly to take you through what I've done in terms of colouring, just so that you can see roughly what I mean. So with this top piece here, this cut line is actually going to be overlapped like so. So we've got a little bit of colour just underneath here, just in case you can see under those layers slightly. It all does depend on how thick a foam pad or silicone glue, if you want to go that route, is going to be as to how much you need to kind of colour to make it seamless. Okay, but I thought you'd like to see it before I cut it all out. So you don't have to colour absolutely every single bit of every single image, because a lot of it we're going to cut away. Okay, another thing to mention is, just for those who are interested, is the pens that I used are Decoupage twin markers, and also they do these brush and extra fine markers. Now these we can use in the 3D Fun Prints pen holders in our machine. So what are the benefits of using alcohol pen? First of all, you're going to find that you get a lovely smooth flat colour. So if you're doing something that needs a fill, if we use alcohol pen, we're going to get a much flatter colour than we would if we were to use a water-based pen. Okay, what you do need to bear in mind is they do bleed a little, so just increase that line width. It does say so in the book, but just in case. Okay, so now we're going to set this to one side, let that completely dry, it's important, and we can clear it out the way and we can get onto the scanning. So I'm going to be working with my scan mat rather than my cutting mat for this first stage of the process. Another thing to note is I'm using the scan mat with no black card inserted. So if this was a die cut or something else where we wanted to pick up a white edge, we'd put black card inside. But for this one, because we want to pick up a black edge, we want to make sure first of all that our the cover and the mat itself is nice and clean. So we're going to pick up what we want, nothing else. You also want to check this top white bar here is clean, okay? So that will help in terms of your contrast. Now, I'm going to offer the mat up to the rollers, and then if we pan to our screen, let's just get this right down. There we go. We're going to load the mat. Now when we're doing this, we want to have the back tray fully out. You also want to make sure that there's nothing obstructing or in its way, so that it's not getting jarred. Our scan mat we want to keep as pristine as possible, just so that we don't run into issues when we are scanning, tracing, whichever it may be. Okay, I'll move over here a bit so you can see the scan button a bit clearer, so there's not so much glare. So I'm going to tap scan because we have the scan mat in, and because we have the scan mat, direct cut will not work just because we don't want to be cutting on this mat. So scan to cut data, scan to USB, or scan to Canvas Workspace when using this mat. We then have the option of size and also the recognition mode. Now we're working with black and white outline, so in the first instance we should use black and white to get as clear a line as possible. So we'll go start. So I'm going to spend a bit of time recognising. Now let me see if I can just tone this camera down a little so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so about there. So we have a preliminary trace which has picked up all of our shapes, and that looks pretty close to what I want. We now have three options across here. We have the around the outside edge detail only. We have both inside and outside, so if you have a black line like we have here, it's going to trace both the outside and the inside. Or we have our kind of draw lines, so where it sees this black line is actually where it's going to draw. Now for this particular method, either of these two options are the right choice. Okay, doesn't matter which one you go for really, but you want to be sticking to those two outside choices. Okay, so I don't really want it to pick up any detail beyond that line, so I'm going to go for this one, and you can see straight away it's cleared up a little bit of confusion on that little shape down there. Okay, now I am going to just bring my arrow in slightly because there's a line which is the edge of my page. We can also see that it's not quite straight. Don't worry about that at this point because there's nothing to say that you will get your print dead straight either. So we could end up using a bit of a rotate. So I'm going to just pull that in. And if we pull it in from this left edge too, the reason that I do that is the less work your machine has to do, the quicker it's going to be to do it. Okay, so I'm going to go preview, and it's now redone that trace to those new parameters. Everything looks okay from what I can see, so I'm going to go OK. Now because we've done scan to cut data, it's going to want us to save that file. Now your machine has a limited amount of space in it, so I know that if I tap machine, there's every chance it's going to tell me that it's full. So instead what I do is I have USB key onto an extension lead that goes into my machine. Basically that extension lead is there to take the friction, the physical pull of having that USB mounted and unmounted as needed, rather than the port on the machine. At the end of the day, if you have to replace the USB port in your machine, it's probably going to be a new machine, especially if you're out of warranty. If however you've done your extension lead in, it's £5. So it's not difficult to do the maths really of actually let's protect our machines a little bit and use that extension lead. Okay, so I can save it to USB. And it's going to tell you what file name it saves. Now you have no control over this, so if you're not sure what that file name is going to be, just write it down. It makes life a little bit easier. If you're used to working with computers, you can put your USB key on there and give it a sensible name. But otherwise, leave it attached to the machine and we can go OK. And that's it. That's simple. Job done. To get back out of it, we're going to reset the machine. So we'll go home. OK to delete all patterns. Unmount the mat. Because essentially, this bit of drawing that we've done is now null and void. Unless you've done like hundreds of sheets and decided that, you know, you're going to scan it in each time because you haven't got enough memory. Fine. So, I'm going to go do my cup mat next. This up here and we'll come back overhead for a moment. There we go. So now I'm going to take my printed sheet, put it the same way up and kind of check the mat. Now my mat is getting really scored up at the moment, so it doesn't have a huge amount of stick. If, however, you have a brand new mat, you just want to be a bit kind of cautious with how much you stick your card. You also want to go careful that you're not dragging fingers over your main image, because if, for any reason, your card's not as much, it's quite soul destroying to find it at this point. That one there, don't mind so much, I'm not saving it. Okay. And for anything else, there's washi tape. So I'm just going to use some of those pieces just to kind of hold it in place as we cut. So over the time of working with a mat, you'll kind of find that your left and top corner tend to get a little bit scored or a little less tacky. So what you can do is just give it a really good clean and re-stick it with some two-way glue, or just invest in a new mat. So I'm using an arty sticks today. To be honest, I'll kind of hop between the two quite happily. But I do find the arty sticks ones just last that little bit longer, can be a bit more rugged and... Okay, let's zoom back in. So, mat is offered up to the rollers. We can press the mat load button. We're going to go to retrieve data, USB, because that's where we saved it. I'm going to go jump down to the bottom and back up a couple, just because I know my file structure is a little weird. And we can see that we've got Euro 100. So we can just tap that. Okay. So we can now see that we've got our decoupage sheet. It's in the middle, it's not going to be in the right place, but we're going to go OK. Now before I do anything else in terms of the mat or lining, I'm going to go to Edit, Multi-Select, Select All, so we have everything on the mat, OK, Object Edit and Group. So that locks everything together so that we keep our alignment. So that's Multi-Select, Select All, Object Edit and Group. Okay, so now we can go OK, OK again, and we're going to do our background scan. So it's going to give us our background scan panel and tell us to start. Oops. Let me just get that a little bit closer in here while we're waiting. There we go. So we can now see that our cut line is clearly not lining up with where we are. So first of all, we'll do it very roughly just to get it roughly in the right place. We're going to go to Edit and Move and Magnify so that we can see a little bit closer what is going on. If we tap the icon in the bottom left corner, we're going to go to 400%. So that allows us to get right into the detail. So straight away, I'm going to line this up. And I think that's pretty central, so I'm going to pan across, and we can see straight away that there's some little odd things that are starting to happen, and what that means is our rotation isn't quite right. So I'm going to go OK, OK, Object Edit, Rotate 1 degree. Now that 1 degree may sound like it's a tiny amount, but in terms of rotation and scanning, it's huge. Okay, so don't think you've got to go straight to the 10 to get a decent amount of rotation. Just one tap of that 1 degree can be enough. So I'm going to go OK, OK, Move, Magnify. And now we can see that actually that looks like it's lining up a little better. We can move that over. And that looks like it's lining up a bit better. Maybe a little nudge up. If we look at like the bottom of the scarf. There we go. And look at all your elements up here. Once you've got this half right, invariably the bottom should be pretty much fixed. So if we scroll down here, you can see that actually these are lining up pretty well. So I'm going to go OK, and we can see that we're more or less lined up and ready to go. Now, is our alignment going to be absolutely perfect? Probably not. Just because a human eye can be so much more refined than a scanner can. As technology advances, it's going to get more and more accurate, but we are always going to be better than machines for the time being. You know, our eyes can see more, we can perceive more. So, at this time, we're better than the machines. So, we'll go OK. Want to go to cut. Now in terms of blade choice, it really just depends on the material that you've chosen, but with something like this where we've got lots of little bumps and little traces around lines, then you are going to want to use your vinyl blade. If you are working on a CM, your standard manual blade, your blue one, is just fine for this. Okay, it's just the black standard auto blade of the SDX isn't quite meant for detail work. So we're on -6 pressure, speed of 1, and let's give it a go. So, once you've cut your pieces, you want to make sure that everything is cut successfully before removing it from the machine. I'm pretty certain that I should be alright. I did end up going around twice just to be completely transparent, and that was just because in some places it hadn't quite got all the way through. Now, if you had unloaded the mat at that point, don't try and put it back in. It's much too detailed a file to be able to kind of remove it and put it back. Okay, so I'm going to remove the mat, close the machine, and then we can turn it off. So we're just going to go OK, home to reset, and shut down. We can then move it out of the way safely and give ourselves a little bit more room to play with. So, just zoom out slightly. There we go. Now, if you have something that has a lot of detail, another quick tip, actually remove the mat from the paper. Occasionally you'll get little bits that still cling, but we can move those as we go. Tends to be like the smaller things, but if you have bits where you've got like little tiny details, it's going to be much kinder to them to do that. Okay. So we've got our little details on here. And then we can just pop out the pieces from our card, like so. Oh, okay. And I think I've got them all. Yep, that looks promising, so we can just discard that to one side and we can start to build our decoupage. Okay, so we have our kind of background piece. Oh, one thing I didn't pop out. Oh, of course, got to cut out my nose. Oh well, it's okay, we coloured the one on the top, so excuse his nose being absent. Oh well, let's go that one next, like so, and then we have a little snowman there. We have a little snowman that is going to pop just behind there. Now bear in mind that underneath all this we're going to have a background image as well. I'm going to pop that there. We have a little snowman just there. And we have his little hat. It's going to go like so. Little nose to go on there. Little heart to go on here. And it's like guess the nose. There we go. Pin the nose on the snowman. Now if you do find like these have gone slightly wonky, don't worry, we can always trim those, okay? But so long as you've gone to the outside, you are always going to have the whole of that outline to play with, okay? So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want to have it so that you have that kind of guideline just to go. Okay, that pops on there like so. And then we have all these little bits that we can assemble onto here. So I'm going to pause the video again, pop that all together. I'm just going to be using some 3D foam. And when I come back, hopefully it'll all be done. And ta-da! So now we have our assembled decoupage. We can either mount this directly onto our background or we can use 3D foam pads. So I've actually used two thicknesses of pads. I have some super thick 3D foam pads and I have some kind of medium size ones as well. You can get shallower to help you with postage and things like that, so don't feel like you have to have these huge thick pads. And if I take just this main element here, just so that you can see, this is what I was on about when I was saying about colouring a little bit behind the cut lines, just because we have this kind of really lifted section here so that you don't have any really white edges. Now obviously on an image like Snowman, that's not going to make too much of a difference, but if these were really strongly coloured on top and then white down the side, it would look a bit weird. Okay, so thank you for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I'd love to see your decoupage creations in the group. So all you have to do is go on to our Facebook group, go to post, add your image using the little camera icon, and then we can all see what you've been up to and have a little bit of a confidence boost, because we're a really supportive group. Take care for now, and bye!